Good afternoon. My name is Maria Suarez, and this is a guide for coaches. It's on addictive and unhealthy behaviors, understanding exercise and addiction. Today, I wanted to discuss exercise addiction and how coaches can recognize the difference between a strong work ethic and a harmful dependence on exercise. My goal is to provide you with a better understanding of the issue and ways you can support your athlete physical and mental well-being. As coaches, I understand that dedication, discipline, and pushing athletes to reach their goal is very important. Athletes are often admired for showing up early, staying late, and giving it their all to see improvement. However, using concepts from Winberg and Gold's Foundation of Sport and Exercise Psychology, we will look at when the commitment can become unhealthy. Defining exercise addiction. So, what exactly is exercise addiction? Exercise addiction is when someone develops a psychological dependence on physical activity and feels unable to control their needs to exercise. The important word here is unable to control. For some athletes, exercise can become the main focus of their life, a concept known as salience. Instead of being just one part of their daily routine, training starts to affect their mood, relationships, and how they view themselves. As coaches, it is important to understand that doing more is not always the best way to improve performance. Exercise and compulsive training is not a sign of greater mental toughness. It can be a warning sign that an athlete may need support. Types of exercise addiction. To better understand exercise addiction, it is important to recognize that it can happen in two different ways. The first is primary exercise addiction, where exercise itself becomes the main focus. The athlete becomes attached to the routine, the feeling of training, or the positive emotion they experience from exercise. The second is secondary exercise addiction, which is often connected to another concern, such as eating disorder. In this case, excessive exercise is used as a way to control their body weight, change body composition, and compensate for food intake. When exercise addiction is secondary, it is important to address the underlying issues instead of only focusing on the athlete's training habits. This is especially important when looking at eating disorders. In some cases, excessive exercise can become a way for athletes to control their body weight, change their body composition, or influence their appearance. When exercise addiction is connected to another psychological concern, such as an eating disorder, the focus cannot just be on reducing exercise. It is important to address the underlying issues and provide the athlete with the appropriate support. So, what are some warning signs of exercise addiction? When professionals are looking for exercise addiction, they look for specific signs and behaviors that can also. One sign is tolerance, where an athlete feels the need to increase the length or intensity of their workout to get the same satisfaction. Another is withdrawal, which can happen when an athlete is unable to train and experience feeling like anxiety, irritability, or difficulty sleeping. A third sign is loss of control, where an athlete consistently trains longer or harder than they originally planned. Conflict can occur when exercise starts interfering with important areas of life, such as school, relationships, or family responsibilities. Psychological and physical factors behind exercise addiction. So, why does exercise addiction happen? There are both biological and psychological factors that can contribute to it. From a biological perspective, the endorphins hypothesis suggests that some athletes may become attached to the positive feeling or the high they experience after intense exercise. Psychologically, some athletes may use exercise as a main way to cope with stress, pressure, or failure, which is known as affect regulation. Another factor is identity foreclosure, where an athlete begins to see their entire identity as being connected only to their sport. If they are not training or performing, they may struggle with their sense of self-worth. As coaches, it is important to recognize that constantly praising extreme training habits can sometimes unintentionally reinforce unhealthy behaviors. So, what are some red flags for coaches? One major sign is when an athlete continues to train despite an injury or medical recommendation to reset. For example, if an athlete is told to take 2 weeks off for stress fracture but continues training in secret, that is a serious concern. Coaches should also pay attention to behaviors like extreme workouts outside of the team practice, feeling extremely guilty when a session is missed, or becoming anxious when training plans change. Another warning sign is decrease in performance. Too much training without proper recovery can lead to fatigue, burnout, and a decline in athletes' overall performance. How coaches can support healthy training habits. The first step is creating a healthier team culture by focusing less on how much an athlete trains and more on how effectively they train. Instead of only praising athletes for working harder than everyone else, recognize things like smart training choices, proper recovery, and consistency. Coaches should also make rest days a normal and important part of the training process. If there are concerns about an athlete's behavior, have a private and supportive conversation. Focus on their health and well-being rather than making them feel judged. It is important to remember that coaches are not mental health professionals. So, build relationships with sports psychologists and other qualified professionals that can help athletes get the support they need. To wrap up, the long-term success in sport comes from finding the right balance between training, stress, and recovery. As a coach, it is important to focus on the athlete as a whole person, not just as their performance. Recognizing warning signs early can help prevent burnout, injury, and negative effects on an athlete's physical and mental health. I encourage coaches to take some time this week to reflect on their team culture and pay attention to how athletes approach training. The goal is to make sure their dedication comes from healthy passion for improvement rather than an unhealthy need to constantly push themselves. Thank you for watching.